Welcome to the ROI Masterclass, the podcast where vision meets strategy and bold moves create measurable results. I'm Liat Siegel, interior designer and ROI strategist with 17 years of experience. I help businesses transform properties and ideas into high-performing assets. This show is specifically for real estate investors, hospitality operators, and boutique developers who aren't afraid to take risks, challenge the status quo, and demand a return on every decision they make. Each and every week, we talk with innovators and leaders across industries about the strategies and the insights and really all the unconventional thinking that turns potential into profit every single time. If you believe that smart design, decisive leadership, and strategic risk are the keys to real ROI, you're in the exact right place. Let's dive in. Today's guest is Mike Clapper, a passionate advocate for universal and human-centric design in hospitality. Drawing from his own experiences as a frequent traveler and wheelchair user, Mike brings a unique perspective on how accessibility isn't just about compliance. It's a powerful business opportunity. He works with hospitality brands, architects, and designers to help them go beyond the basics, creating exceptional guest experiences that drive ROI. Mike's insights are backed by compelling data and a genuine commitment to making spaces better for everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, Mike. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, likewise. Glad to be here.
Amazing. So tell us in your own words, what drove you to do what you do today?
Yeah, so it was really a personal experience that's kind of the tipping point for me. So my wife and I, a few years ago, were on a cruise. It was a great 16-day cruise. We started in the UK and landed eventually in Reykjavik, Iceland. And the only problem was when we got to Reykjavik, there was no way for me to get my wheelchair off of the cruise ship. And so just to back up, I'm obviously a wheelchair user. And so that's kind of the lens that I see disability through. And so, yeah, we got there. It was time to get off the ship. We got all of our stuff together, went down to the gangway, and it was too narrow. And because it's a cold climate, there were spikes going down the gangway all the way. And the ironic thing was that it was July. So, it's still Iceland, but it was definitely not snowy, definitely not icy. So we were stuck on board for 24 hours and all by ourselves. Everyone kind of looked around. I kind of looked around at the stewards and said, now what? And they were like, oh, we can carry you. And I'm like, no, that's not going to work. So yeah, long story short, we were the only two guests on the ship for 24 hours. And I went back, and what started as a list of grievances and things that I was going to write to the cruise line about turned into a business plan. And I realized the problem was not empathy. Everyone had empathy for my situation. They offered us free drinks, coffee, we'll let you stay on board complimentary for one night, obviously, things like that. But it wasn't empathy. It was execution. Nobody knew how to handle the situation. And so that's what this idea kind of sparked.
How did that leave you feeling? I mean, you're the only ones, you're kind of in essence left behind.
As someone with a disability, that's something that I have dealt with my entire life. It's really funny. I mentioned my wife a minute ago, and I find this in a lot of the disabled community. We're used to this, especially people that have had a disability their entire life. It's often the spouse that is like, hey, something needs to change. What is going on here? I'm just like, is what it is. That was probably the biggest, kind of most impactful moment because we were the only two left on a ship for that long. But yeah, it left me motivated, to be honest with you. Like I said, I was writing out a list of grievances, and it turned into this spark of an idea that led me to where I am today. So
wow. And it's not just you, right? What are the statistics like in terms of how widespread of a problem this is?
There's a couple ways to look at this. So first of all, it's important to remember that 1 in 4 people these days have a disability, and that's not physical. I'm talking physical, blind, low vision, hearing loss, all sorts of, issues like autism, even food allergies, the list expands. And that was one of the things that really hit me as I started doing research is, like I said a minute ago, I see it through the physical lens, but when you expand the view, there's so much going on. So 1 out of 4 4 people have a disability. So it's a huge untapped market. And when you look at it from a ROI standpoint or from a business standpoint, it's $100 billion market a year just here in the US.
Wow, that's huge. And we were talking about it before the show that, right, it started out for you as a business play, but then it became a people play.
Yeah, I mean, I have a business background, so I haven't always been in hospitality and certainly not in consulting, but I have a business background in tech and medical devices. So I always look at things from a business lens, like this is an easy play. Let's help you maximize your revenue, right? But the more I looked into this and did research and came up with what I really believe, I realized this is just a human play that helps everyone, not just people with disabilities, but everyone. If we elevate guest experience, elevate design, it impacts everyone.
And what are some of those things? Like if you could rattle off a list, your grievances and all of those things and into like a scope basically of what typical properties could do to elevate that experience.
It doesn't always take a massive remodel of a space, right, to do little things. When I think about accessibility, when I think about consulting with clients, there's really 3 pillars or 3 principles that I look at, and that is design that includes, guest service that elevates, and systems that scale. So it's really a 3-pronged approach that I look at. So let's talk about design that includes first. That can be as simple as putting in door openers to get in and out of exterior doors or into the bathroom and making sure that they're on. Right? So many times I have everything set up, but I go to press the button and it doesn't work. And that's either because it's broken, or a lot of times they turn it off at night to clean and they forget to flip it back on in the morning. Another great example of that is just, accessible rooms. So you can be ADA compliant and that's wonderful, but let's really step that up to think about how we can make the room feel light and airy and inviting rather than making sure that the toilet is the right height. There are grab bars, etc. So that's the design side of things. When I think about guest service that elevates, that's as simple as training staff to know how to communicate with people better. So many times when I go to check into a hotel, I get this deer in the headlights look from the staff, and it's not because they're mean or angry or whatever. It's because they don't know how to handle my situation. So I work with clients to say, let's talk about how we handle this. Let's role play this. Let's figure out ways to make this, feel more natural for everybody, not just for the guests with disability, but for the staff. Let's make sure everyone feels good about it. That last pillar is systems that scale. And what I'm looking at here is technology. With AI and all the other tech tools that we have, there are simple ways to improve the communication process, both before, during, and after your stay to make it better for the guest and for the staff.
Wow. I really like that. So tell us again the pillars, the 3 pillars.
Design that includes, guest experience that elevates, and systems that scale.
I love that. How does that also play into senior living? Because that's another huge category that we know that's really growing right now. And there are a lot of designers and architects that are working on those properties in order to create a really incredible experience. How can that be up-leveled, and how can we take more into consideration the aging population?
That's a really good question. I actually had a really interesting conversation just recently with an architect who's building all of his homes now with universal design in mind for that very reason. Because this aging population, by 2050, billion people worldwide are going to be over the age of 60. So it's just incredible.
And so what kind of things can be put into place to help them as well?
Just simple things like lower countertops, if you're looking at a residential home, 0 threshold entryway, more turning space, right? So instead of having a 3-foot corridor, let's open it up to 5 feet when we're building a house or remodeling. Simple steps like that, making sure the bathroom is not just accessible, but beautifully designed to incorporate that 0 threshold entry, things of that nature.
You were saying in our last conversation about how disabled travelers spend 1.7 times more and stay 2.9 times longer than average.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us more about those statistics?
It's a fascinating thing in that disabled travelers, as you say, travel with more people. And I think that's just because they travel with companions, family, caretakers, whoever, and they stay longer and they spend more. So when you're looking at this from, again, the business perspective, not just the people perspective, this is not just a group that is underserved that we need to look at as a moral imperative or, something that needs to change in our society. It's a good business business play. They spend more, they stay longer, and they travel with more people. So I'm not sure why we would go after a market that is that lucrative.
Absolutely. How do you think that impacts in terms of the dollars, right? How does that impact ROI?
Well, I think that we need to look at accessibility as a growth multiplier, not a compliance checkbox, right? So all of those things that we just talked about, they stay longer. They travel with 2.9 more guests per stay. If you look in the ROI component, that's not just guest rooms, that's spend in the restaurant, spend at the spa, et cetera, et cetera. So those are actual growth multipliers that we can apply to ROI to say, wouldn't you want to expand your business by 2.9 times? That seems like an easy thing to
Yeah,
me.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Especially when you said that it's a $100 to $500 billion industry. Is that
Yeah,
right?
so when you look at disabled travelers just here in the US, it's a $100 billion number, and that was before COVID. So the numbers really haven't been run since then. And if you factor in the aging population, it can be all the way up to $500 billion. I mean, it's just a huge, this isn't niche. This is a huge untapped market that's just waiting to be served. That's how I
It's
see it.
definitely an ROI lever, as I like to call it.
It is definitely,
Yeah.
definitely a lever. Yes, ma'am. Yep.
And your background in brand strategy, how do you think that plays into how accessibility, let's say, an investor takes on making sure that their properties are more accessible. Now what? So how does your brand strategy play into how this is now positioned?
Yeah, that's, I think, one of the ways that I differentiate myself from other consultants in the marketplace. People that have disabilities come at it from lived experience, and that is wonderful. But I have that side. I also have, as you just mentioned, that business acumen, that business mind, where I say, hey, look, how can we brand this better? How can we message better? Even talking about the training that we talked about a few minutes ago, how can we script this so that when every guest walks in, not just a disabled guest, not just, an older traveler, but every guest feels more seen? Because as we've talked about, this is a human endeavor. This isn't just, a have to, it's a need to, and it's where the industry is headed. So I have this kind of like right brain, left brain thing going on where I look at it from lived experience, but then I can put on my business hat for a minute and say, okay, wait a minute. Let's look at how we can brand this better, how we can message this better, how we can put systems in that scale, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, that could actually make a real impact in your business, not collect dust somewhere, not just an SOP that, collects dust somewhere in an office someplace. So that's how I use both sides of my brain, so to speak.
I love how you said that this is not just a checkbox, right? Because I think naturally ADA compliance is such a big deal, right? It's naturally just make sure that it's done. But coming from it and understanding stories like you told, I am sure there's countless of stories like yours where there's a human component behind it. There's a human element. And in addition to the fact that this is extremely lucrative, right? You have both factors. You have both the people factor and you have the ROI factor. I think that any investor would be remiss. It wouldn't be good for them to not take this into consideration, but also spending a lot of money on getting this done, making sure that it's marketed properly, making sure that they know when they come on. We always say the online to offline experience, online, that they see, that they know that there are plenty of options available for them to be able to use the space, to feel comfortable in the space, to be welcomed, and also to then now build that into AI, right? When somebody is then searching on chat or some other AI, where can I go that would have accommodations for me? Chat is going to come up with, with your property, right? That you've invested in because you've also invested in marketing, because you've also positioned it online to call the people to your property.
Yeah, you just touched on so many important issues there, Leah. I feel like we need a whole podcast just to discuss that topic because you're so right. Let me unpack it a little bit because there's so much in there. First of all, you talked about ADA compliance. That's the floor, not the ceiling. So many times I think when people think about ADA, they think about, like we've been saying, let's check the box. Okay, we have the number of rooms. Correct. We have a toilet in the public restroom that is the proper, size. Check. All those things, these aren't check marks. These are just the floor, right? If we look at those universal design principles that are so important and we actually build this into the actual build of the building, whether that's a new build or a remodel, we can serve everybody. And ADA compliance is just just a starting point. We can make bases that are beautiful, welcoming, and serve everybody. So that's on the design side. You talked about technology. This is so huge. And again, I'm building some things that I'm hoping to launch here in the next couple months that are going to be groundbreaking for that. Because when somebody with a disability books, all we see is that room accessible or not accessible? But there are so many other factors that come into play. What if we use AI to then go collect all that information, send it to the hotel in advance so that when I arrive, they already know what special needs I need, and there's none of this like deer in the headlights, oh no, now what kind of thing happening.
I love that. I love that. And I think I love that you're coming from the perspective, not from a negative perspective, but of how can I, and woe is me, but how can I find a solution? How can I be of benefit, not just for yourself, but for other people that are going through it?
Yeah.
That is where things always change, right? When we think positive and we're trying to find solutions rather than trying to tear things down because they didn't work, which is easy to do. And I understand, but you could have totally been so upset and whatever, but you took it and you transformed it into something very positive.
Yeah, that's just mindset. And it's something that I have to credit my parents for a ton. Since I was just a little boy, they told me I could do anything I wanted to. And we were always looking for solutions. How can Michael do this? How can Michael be involved? How can he stay in school, go to college, get married, all of these things? Like none of that was like, oh, how am I going to do this? It was just, there's a solution out there. Let's do it. And then the other thing too is just my faith. I think I happen to be wearing this shirt today, faith over fear. And when you talk about that, there's a lot of fear in the world, right? Of like, oh my gosh, woe is me. Why is this happening to me? But for me, when I center my faith on my relationship with God, everything becomes possible. He's the God of the impossible. And so like, that just happens,
That's such a wonderful mindset. Is this something that you were born with? And how did that shape your mindset growing up?
I was born with a disability. I have cerebral palsy, which is a kind of a catch-all term for somebody who had brain damage either before or during birth. I'm adopted and I don't know my birth parents, so we don't know my birth story, so to speak. Around 6 months old, my parents noticed, hey, he's not developing physically like, other babies. And so what's going on? And that's when they took me to the doctor and realized that, yeah, I have some brain damage from cerebral palsy.
Wow. How has that shaped your life and you touched on that and your faith, but how has that shape the way that you see the world, the way that you interact?
That's a really fascinating question. And again, something, if this wasn't the ROI masterclass podcast, that we could discuss for hours, right? It's funny, when I was growing up, I wanted to be like everybody else. And it wasn't that my disability was a bad thing, but I just wanted to fit in with everybody. As I've gotten older, I found that it's actually an advantage. And that I look at the world in a slightly different way. And I approach things in a slightly different way, an innovative way even. And so I take it as a good thing, as something that makes me unique. Like everything is so black and white these days, and I'm just me. So that's great.
It's so wonderful. It's such an infectious way of seeing the world. And I like to say also with the ROI podcast that it's not ROI just for money. It's
Right.
ROI of people, right? That people-centric understanding of the world, that you can only have that ROI when you understand other people's perspectives, their different ways of life, their ways, the disadvantages that they might have grown up with that now has become their greatest advantage.
Absolutely.
So I really appreciate you sharing your story and sharing your insights with us. If our audience wants to get in touch with you and they want to learn more of how you can help them, how can they do that?
Sure, there's a couple ways. The first is by going to my website, able2global.com. That's kind of my business arm and my consulting arm. I'm also doing a ton of thought leadership right now. I'm realizing that we can consult all day long, but if we don't educate people, then we're not really getting anywhere. So I have my own podcast as well. It's called the Inclusioneer Lab. It's like Imagineer Disney, Imagineer, but it's inclusioneerlab.com. And that's my kind of thought leadership space. And I love interacting with people more on a personal level there. But if you are a business that this is something that resonates with you, hit me up on able2global.com. There's a contact me page, or find me on LinkedIn. I'm there all the time. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us, for sharing your insights with us today. And I can't wait to see what you do next.
It's been a pleasure, Leah. Thank you so much.